Picture this. You're in the middle of a vast ocean. The skies are dark, the wind is roaring, and waves tower above you, threatening to pull you under. You try to fight, but the harder you struggle, the more the storm seems to intensify. It feels like hope is slipping away with every crashing wave. Now, pause for a moment and ask yourself, is this how life feels for you right now? The storms of life come in many forms. It could be a broken relationship, financial hardship, a devastating loss, or an illness that makes you question your strength. Whatever your storm looks like, there's one thing you must remember. You are not alone. The message I have for you today is simple but life-changing. God fights for you even when you feel like giving up. That's right. When you're at your lowest, when you can barely whisper a prayer, God is already moving on your behalf. He sees you. He hears your cries, and he is working in ways you can't even imagine. But here's the thing, the enemy wants you to believe otherwise. He wants you to feel isolated and defeated. He wants you to think that God has forgotten you, that you're too broken, too far gone, or too insignificant to matter. Let me tell you right now, that is a lie. The truth is found in the Word of God, and it's a truth that will set you free. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 41, verse 10, God says, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." This isn't just a comforting verse. It's a promise from the Creator of the universe that He will not let you fall. Right now you might be feeling overwhelmed, but what if today was the day you decided to let God take control of the storm? What if, instead of fighting the waves on your own, you allowed Him to carry you through? Here's what I want you to do. Comment below with this declaration: God is my strength in every storm. Write it, say it, believe it. When you speak this truth, you're not just encouraging yourself, you're encouraging others who are walking through their own storms. And if this message resonates with you, if you believe that God's Word has the power to transform lives, then take a step of faith today. Subscribe to this channel and share this video. Why? Because every time you do, you're helping to spread the hope and light of Jesus to someone who desperately needs it. You're partnering in the mission to show the world that no storm is greater than the power of our God. Think about it. One simple action, clicking that subscribe button or sharing this message, could be the seed that changes someone's life. You never know who's waiting for a word of hope, who's clinging to their last shred of faith, needing to hear that God hasn't given up on them. So let's make a commitment together right now. Say this out loud: I will not lose hope because God is fighting for me. That's the kind of faith that moves mountains. As we journey through this message, I want you to reflect deeply on what it means to have a God who fights for you. Each word, each verse, is meant to remind you of His unshakable promises. This isn't just another video. It's an opportunity to let hope rise in your heart again. Stay with me until the end, because what you'll discover in the next few moments might just change how you face every storm in your life. Let's begin. Number 1. The book of Psalms, chapter 34, verse 17. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. When you find yourself in the middle of life's most relentless storms, the thought of deliverance can feel almost impossible. The crashing waves of uncertainty, fear, or pain seem too powerful to overcome. But the Word of God assures us that in those moments of despair, our cries do not go unheard. This verse from Psalms reminds us that God is not distant. He is not indifferent to your struggles. Instead, He hears every cry of His people, every whispered prayer, every desperate plea for help. And not only does He hear, but He also promises to act. He delivers them from all their troubles. Think about that for a moment. The Creator of the universe, the one who spoke the stars into existence, bends down to listen when you call out to Him. Imagine a king leaving his throne to attend to the cry of a child. That's the picture of how God responds to you in your pain. But here's the challenge. In the middle of the storm, it's hard to trust that help is on the way. The fear and chaos around you can drown out the hope that deliverance is coming. That's why faith is so important. Faith isn't about pretending the storm doesn't exist. It's about trusting that God is greater than the storm. Consider this. What would happen if, instead of focusing on the size of the storm, you focused on the size of your God? The storms in your life might feel overwhelming, but they are no match for the power of the one who commands the winds and the waves. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 8, verse 26, we see Jesus rebuke a storm with just 3 words: "Peace, be still." The same Jesus who calmed the storm for his disciples is the one who stands by your side today. He is ready to speak peace into your chaos, but he asks for one thing: your trust. Now let's get personal. What are the storms in your life that are making you cry out to God? Is it a broken relationship, a financial struggle, a health crisis? Whatever it is, I want you to pause and reflect on this. God is already working behind the scenes to deliver you. It's easy to think that deliverance will come on your terms, in your timing, and in the way you expect. But God's ways are higher than ours, and his timing is perfect. Sometimes the storm lasts longer than we want, because he's doing something greater in us. He's building resilience, strengthening our faith, and drawing us closer to him. Take a moment to ask yourself, what is God teaching me in this storm? What part of my faith is he growing? Often, the hardest seasons of life are the ones that prepare us for God's greatest blessings. If you felt like giving up, let this be your reminder. Don't lose hope. God hears you, and he is fighting for you. Leave a comment below and declare this truth: God hears my cries, and he is delivering me. Every time you speak these words, you're choosing to focus on God's promises instead of the size of your problems. You're shifting your heart from fear to faith. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe to this channel. By doing so, you're not only strengthening your own faith, but also helping to spread this message of hope to others. Someone out there needs to hear that God is fighting for them, and you can help make that happen. The journey through the storm may not be easy, but you are not alone. God is with you, listening to every cry and preparing to deliver you in ways you cannot yet imagine. So hold on, because the one who calmed the sea is also calming the storm in your life. Let's keep going. There's so much more to uncover about how God fights for us. Are you ready? Number 2, the book of Isaiah, chapter 41, verse 10. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Fear is one of the most paralyzing emotions we can experience. It creeps in during life's storms, whispering lies that you are alone, that you are too weak, and that there is no way out. Yet in this verse, God speaks directly to those moments of fear and assures us of his unshakable presence and power. Do not fear, for I am with you. These words are not a suggestion, they are a command. God knows that fear can cloud our judgment, sap our strength, and make us forget his promises. When we allow fear to dominate, we stop looking at God and instead focus on the waves threatening to consume us. But God calls us to lift our eyes above the storm and fix them on him, the one who is always with us. The assurance of God's presence is transformative. Think about it. The same God who parted the Red Sea for the Israelites, who walked with Daniel in the lion's den, and who shielded Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, is the same God who stands with you in your struggles. He does not abandon his people. When he says, I am with you, it is a promise of his active involvement in your life, no matter how dire the circumstances. The second part of this verse, do not be dismayed, for I am your God, shifts our focus to God's identity. He reminds us that he is not just any God, he is your God. The personal nature of this statement is profound. It's not just about his power or authority, it's about his relationship with you. He is your protector, your provider, your refuge, and your strength. In the face of overwhelming challenges, it's easy to feel weak and powerless. But God doesn't leave us to fend for ourselves. He promises, I will strengthen you and help you. These words are not empty reassurances. They are backed by the power of the Almighty. When you feel like you can't take another step, when the weight of your burden seems unbearable, God's strength becomes your strength. He empowers you to endure, to persevere, and to overcome. This promise of strength is not limited to physical endurance. It extends to your heart, your mind, and your spirit. He strengthens your faith when doubts arise. He strengthens your hope when despair threatens to take over. He strengthens your resolve to keep trusting Him, even when the path ahead is unclear. The final part of the verse, "I will uphold you with my righteous right hand," is a powerful image of God's support. Picture a child about to fall and a loving parent reaching out to catch them. That's what God does for us. His righteous right hand symbolizes His power, justice, and faithfulness. When you feel like you're about to collapse under the weight of your struggles, God upholds you. He doesn't let you fall. What's even more remarkable is that this promise is not dependent on your strength or ability. It's not about how good you are, how strong your faith is, or how much you've achieved. It's entirely about God's character. He upholds you because He is righteous, because He is faithful, and because He loves you unconditionally. Let's take a moment to reflect on how this promise applies to your life. Are there areas where fear has taken hold, where you've been dismayed or discouraged? Think about those moments and hear God's voice speaking directly to you. "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God." Consider the times when you felt too weak to carry on. Maybe you've faced setbacks that seemed insurmountable. Maybe you've experienced losses that left you feeling broken. In those moments, remember that God's strength is made perfect in your weakness. When you can't stand, He upholds you. When you can't move forward, He carries you. The storms of life are inevitable, but fear does not have to control you. Dismay does not have to define you. With God by your side, you have access to a strength that surpasses human understanding. You have the assurance that no matter how strong the winds may blow, the one who holds you will never let you go. As we continue this journey, hold on to this truth. God's presence is the anchor in every storm. His strength is the lifeline that keeps you steady, and His righteous right hand is the unshakable foundation on which you can stand. Number 3, the book of Romans, chapter 8, verse 28. "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." Life has a way of presenting challenges that make us question everything. When we're in the middle of pain, confusion, or heartbreak, it's hard to see how any good could possibly come from it. But this verse in Romans reminds us of a truth that has carried countless believers through their darkest moments. God is always at work, even in the hardest seasons of life. Take a moment to reflect on the phrase, "in all things." This isn't a promise for only the good times or the moments when everything is going well. It's a promise for all things, the triumphs and the trials, the victories and the setbacks, the joys and the sorrows. Every part of your story, no matter how messy or broken it seems, is being woven together by God's loving hands for a greater purpose. But here's the part that requires faith. In the middle of the storm, we often can't see the full picture. Imagine an artist painting a masterpiece. If you only saw the individual brushstrokes up close, they might look chaotic, disjointed, and meaningless. But when you step back and view the entire canvas, you begin to see the beauty of the design. That's what God is doing in your life. You might only see the messy brushstrokes right now, but He sees the masterpiece He's creating. One of the most difficult aspects of trusting this promise is that God's definition of good often looks different from ours. We might think good means a life free of hardship, where every prayer is answered in the way we hope. But God's ultimate goal isn't just our comfort, it's our transformation. He is shaping us to become more like Christ, to grow in faith, and to fulfill His purpose for our lives. Consider Joseph's story in the book of Genesis. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and wrongfully imprisoned, Joseph endured years of suffering and uncertainty. Yet, through it all, God was at work. By the end of Joseph's journey, he rose to a position of great influence in Egypt and saved countless lives during a famine. In Genesis chapter 50 verse 20, Joseph says to his brothers, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph's story reminds us that what the enemy means for harm, God can use for good. That same principle applies to your life. The heartbreak, the loss, the struggles, they are not wasted. God is using every piece of your story to fulfill His divine plan. But how do we trust this promise in the middle of the storm? It begins with surrender. When we release our need to control the outcome and trust that God's plans are better than our own, we open the door for Him to work in powerful ways. This doesn't mean the pain disappears overnight, but it does mean we can face it with hope, knowing that God is with us and for us. This is why it's so important to hold on to the truth of Romans 8:28. When doubts creep in, when fear tries to take over, and when it feels like everything is falling apart, remind yourself, God is working for my good. Even when you can't see it, He is faithful. Think about the storms in your life right now. Is there a situation where you've been struggling to see how God could possibly bring something good out of it? Maybe it's a financial crisis, a broken relationship, or a season of deep loneliness. Whatever it is, take heart in knowing that God is not finished with your story. What looks like a setback may actually be a setup for something greater. Here's something powerful to reflect on. Your current storm could become the testimony that inspires someone else to trust God in their own struggles. When we allow God to work in our pain, He not only transforms our lives, but also uses our experiences to bring hope to others. I encourage you to take a step of faith today and declare this truth. God is turning my pain into purpose. Write it in the comments as a reminder to yourself and as an encouragement to others who may be going through similar battles. Every time you speak this, you're aligning your heart with God's promises and choosing to trust His plan. The storms of life are not random. They are part of a greater story, one that God is writing for His glory and your ultimate good. Trust the process, even when it doesn't make sense, because one day you'll look back and see how every moment, good and bad, was part of a masterpiece you couldn't yet see. Let's keep moving forward, because there's more to uncover about how God fights for us in the storms of life. Number 4, the book of Exodus, chapter 14, verse 14. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Udradi. This verse is one of the most powerful declarations of God's sovereignty, spoken during one of the most defining moments in biblical history. The Israelites stood trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army with no visible way of escape. Panic and fear gripped their hearts as they questioned Moses, asking why they had been brought out of Egypt only to face death in the wilderness. And then, in the midst of their fear, Moses speaks these words of reassurance. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Imagine the scene. Chaos surrounds them. They can see the enemy approaching, hear the thunder of chariots, and feel the weight of their helplessness. Yet Moses calls them to an action that seems completely counterintuitive in the face of danger: to be still. Why would God ask them to be still in such a terrifying moment? Shouldn't they be running, strategizing, or preparing for battle? This command reveals a profound truth about how God works in our lives. Being still doesn't mean doing nothing. It means surrendering control to the one who holds all power. The Israelites were about to witness a miracle unlike anything they had ever seen. God was about to part the Red Sea, providing them with a path to freedom while completely destroying their enemies. But for that miracle to unfold, they had to trust Him fully. Their stillness was an act of faith, faith that God would fight for them in a way they could never accomplish on their own. This moment at the Red Sea is a mirror for our own lives. How often do we find ourselves standing in the middle of impossible circumstances with no clear way out? The pressures of life feel overwhelming, and our instinct is to fight, to fix, to find a way through in our own strength. But God's command remains the same: be still and trust that I am fighting for you. Stillness requires more than physical inactivity. It requires a posture of the heart. It's about quieting the noise of fear and doubt and choosing to believe that God is in control, even when the situation looks hopeless. It's about releasing the need to have all the answers and resting in the truth that God's ways are higher than ours. When we embrace stillness, we create space for God to move. Think about it. If the Israelites had panicked and tried to run, they might have missed the miracle entirely. But because they stopped and trusted, they were able to walk through the Red Sea on dry ground, a path that only God could provide. In our own storms, being still doesn't mean ignoring the reality of our struggles. It means acknowledging them and then surrendering them to God. It's about saying, Lord, I can't do this on my own, but I trust that you can. The fight belongs to God because the battle is spiritual. As Paul reminds us in the book of Ephesians chapter 6 verse 12, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. The storms we face are often deeper than they appear, and they require divine intervention. God's ability to fight for us is rooted in his character. He is all-powerful, all-knowing, and ever-present. There is no force in heaven or on earth that can stand against him. When he fights for you, victory is not only possible, it is guaranteed. But what does this look like in a practical sense? Being still doesn't mean ignoring your responsibilities or refusing to take action when God leads. It means placing your confidence in him rather than in your own strength or abilities. It's about aligning your heart with his will and allowing him to guide your steps. For example, if you're facing a financial storm, being still might mean trusting God to provide while taking practical steps of stewardship and faithfulness. If you're in the middle of a relational conflict, being still might mean praying for God's wisdom and allowing him to soften hearts instead of forcing your own solutions. Stillness is not passive, it's a dynamic act of faith. It's a declaration that you believe in the power, goodness, and faithfulness of God, even when the situation looks impossible. As we reflect on Exodus 14:14, let it remind you that God is not asking you to carry the weight of the storm on your own. He is inviting you to trust him, to surrender control, and to watch as he does what only he can do. Just as he made a way through the Red Sea for the Israelites, he will make a way for you. When you feel overwhelmed, remember these words. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. They are not just ancient words spoken to a group of people thousands of years ago. They are a living promise for you today. The same God who delivered the Israelites is fighting for you now. The battle is not yours to fight alone. Stand still, trust, and let God be your defender. Number 5, the book of Matthew, chapter 11, verse 28. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Weariness is a universal experience. Life's demands, struggles, and storms can leave us feeling drained and burdened, both physically and emotionally. Jesus, in this powerful verse, speaks directly to the heart of every person who has ever felt overwhelmed, saying, "Come to me." This invitation is simple, yet profound. It's not a call to perform or prove yourself. It's not an instruction to fix your life before approaching him. Instead, Jesus simply says, "Come." He welcomes us in the middle of our mess, with all our weariness, doubts, and burdens. To understand the weight of this invitation, it's important to reflect on who Jesus is. He's not just a teacher or a prophet. He is the Son of God, the Savior of the world. When he says, "I will give you rest," it's not an empty promise. It's an assurance from the one who holds all power and authority in his hands. But what kind of rest is Jesus offering? It's more than physical relief or a break from our busy schedules. The rest Jesus gives is deeper. It is rest for the soul. It is the kind of peace that surpasses all understanding, the kind that remains steady even when life feels chaotic. To fully appreciate this rest, let's go back to the context in which Jesus spoke these words. At the time, the people were burdened by the heavy yoke of religious laws and traditions. They were constantly striving to earn God's favor through their own efforts, weighed down by a system that offered no real hope or freedom. Jesus' invitation was a radical departure from this way of life. He wasn't calling people to another set of rules or obligations. He was calling them to himself. "Come to me," he said, not to religion, not to rituals, but to a relationship with him. For us today, the message is just as relevant. We live in a world that constantly tells us to do more, achieve more, and be more. We carry the weight of expectations, failures, and fears. Yet in the midst of all this, Jesus offers us an alternative: to lay down our burdens and find true rest in Him. How do we accept this invitation? It starts with surrender. We must acknowledge that we cannot carry the weight of life's storms on our own. We must recognize our need for a Savior and trust that Jesus is sufficient to meet that need. This act of surrender is not a sign of weakness. It is a declaration of faith. When we come to Jesus, we are placing our hope in the one who has already overcome the world. As He says in the book of John, chapter 16, verse 33, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." Imagine the peace that comes from knowing that you don't have to fight every battle on your own. Imagine the freedom of releasing your burdens into the hands of the one who loves you unconditionally. This is the rest that Jesus offers, a rest that transforms your heart and renews your strength. But here's something important to understand. Coming to Jesus doesn't mean all your problems will instantly disappear. The storms of life may still rage, but His presence gives you the strength to endure them. His rest is not the absence of struggle, but the assurance of His peace in the midst of it. Think about the moments in your life when you felt the most burdened. What would it look like to bring those burdens to Jesus? What would change if you truly believed that He could give you rest? This promise is not just for a select few. It's for everyone who chooses to come to Him. No matter where you've been, what you've done, or how far you feel from God, His invitation remains the same: come to me. As you reflect on this promise, take a moment to consider the areas of your life where you need rest. Where are you carrying burdens that you were never meant to bear? Bring them to Jesus and allow Him to give you the peace and strength you need. Here's something special. Imagine being part of a community that shares this journey with you, a place where we can encourage one another, learn together, and grow in faith as we follow Jesus. By clicking the Join button and becoming a member, you'll step into a space of mutual support and shared purpose, a family seeking the true rest that only Jesus can provide. Number 6, the book of Isaiah, chapter 43, verse 2. "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze." This verse from the book of Isaiah carries one of the most reassuring promises in Scripture, that God's presence is constant and unshakable no matter what trials we face. Notice the language in this verse. It doesn't say, "if you pass through the waters," or "if you walk through the fire." It says "when." This subtle choice of words is a reminder that life's challenges are inevitable. We will all face moments that feel like deep waters threatening to pull us under, or flames that seem too intense to withstand. But God's promise is clear: you will not face them alone. Let's reflect on the imagery of water first. Water is powerful and unpredictable. It can symbolize chaos, uncertainty, and situations that feel overwhelming. The words, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you," remind us that God is not a distant observer. He steps into the chaos with us, walking beside us, guiding us, and ensuring that we are not swept away. Think about the Israelites crossing the Red Sea. From a human perspective, the situation seemed impossible. A vast sea before them, and Pharaoh's army closing in behind. Yet in that moment, God demonstrated His power and faithfulness. He parted the waters, creating a path where none existed. This wasn't just an escape. It was a miracle that revealed God's care and protection for His people. Now think about the waters in your own life. Maybe you're facing uncertainty about your future, a relationship that feels broken beyond repair, or a situation where the obstacles seem insurmountable. Isaiah 43:2 reminds us that no matter how high the waves rise, God is with you. The waters will not sweep over you because He is your anchor, your protector, and your guide. The verse goes on to say, "When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze." Fire, like water, is a powerful force. It represents trials that test us to our very core, moments of pain, loss, and refinement. But here's the beauty of this promise. The fire may surround you, but it will not consume you. This imagery brings to mind the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the book of Daniel, chapter 3. These 3 men were thrown into a fiery furnace for refusing to worship a false god. The fire was so intense that it killed the soldiers who threw them in. Yet when King Nebuchadnezzar looked into the furnace, he saw not 3 men, but 4, walking unharmed in the flames. The 4th figure, described as like a son of the gods, was a visible representation of God's presence. What's remarkable about this story is not just that they were unharmed, but that they experienced God's presence in the middle of the fire. They didn't avoid the trial, but they were delivered through it. This is the kind of protection Isaiah 43:2 speaks of, a promise that God will be with you in the fire, shielding you and sustaining you so that the flames do not consume you. In our lives, the fires might look like personal loss, illness, rejection, or betrayal. These moments test us, but they also refine us. Just as fire purifies gold, our trials can strip away what is unnecessary and draw us closer to God. The process is not easy, but it is purposeful. Take a moment to consider, what are the waters and fires in your life right now? Are you struggling to stay afloat in a sea of uncertainty? Are you walking through a fire that feels too hot to bear? This verse reminds us that God is present in every step, every moment. He doesn't promise a life without challenges, but He does promise His unwavering presence and protection. When you feel overwhelmed by the waters, remember that God is the one who parts seas. When you feel consumed by the fire, remember that God is the one who walks with you in the flames. His power is not diminished by your circumstances. In fact, it is often in the hardest moments that His presence becomes most evident. This promise should fill you with hope. It doesn't mean you won't face difficulties. It means those difficulties won't have the final word. The waters will not sweep you away. The flames will not consume you. God's power, presence, and love are greater than any trial you will ever face. As we move forward, let's hold on to this truth. God is not just watching over you from a distance. He is with you, fighting for you, and ensuring that the waters and fires in your life will not overcome you. Number 7, the book of James, chapter 1, verses 2-4. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. At first glance, these words from the book of James might seem difficult to accept. Pure joy in the face of trials? How can anyone find joy in pain, heartbreak, or adversity? But James isn't suggesting that we celebrate suffering itself. Instead, he's pointing to a deeper truth, that trials are not pointless, and they serve a greater purpose in the life of a believer. Let's start by understanding why James says, whenever you face trials, not if. Trials are inevitable in this broken world. They come in many forms: loss, failure, disappointment, and hardship. But what James is teaching us is that trials are not random obstacles. They are opportunities for spiritual growth. The key lies in the phrase, the testing of your faith. When we face challenges, our faith is put to the test. It's easy to trust God when life is smooth, but trials reveal the depth and resilience of our trust in Him. This testing isn't meant to break us, it's meant to strengthen us. Just as gold is refined by fire, our faith is refined through the challenges we endure. Now let's focus on what this testing produces: perseverance. Perseverance is not simply enduring hardship. It's the ability to keep moving forward with faith, even when the path is difficult. It's the spiritual stamina that allows us to stand firm in the face of adversity, knowing that God is with us and working for our good. But James doesn't stop there. He tells us to let perseverance finish its work. This is important because perseverance is not just about surviving trials, it's about being transformed by them. When we allow God to work in our struggles, He uses them to shape us into people who are mature and complete, lacking nothing. Think of an athlete training for a marathon. The process is grueling, filled with pain and exhaustion, but each step of the training builds strength, endurance, and confidence. By the end, the athlete is prepared to run the race with perseverance. In the same way, the trials we face in life are part of God's training plan for our souls. It's worth noting that James doesn't say trials are joyful in and of themselves. What brings joy is the knowledge of what those trials are producing. When we view challenges through the lens of faith, we can see them not as obstacles, but as opportunities for growth. This perspective can change everything. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" we can ask, "What is God teaching me through this?" Instead of focusing on the pain, we can focus on the purpose. This shift in mindset doesn't make the trial easier, but it gives it meaning. Consider the story of Joseph once again. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and imprisoned unjustly, Joseph endured years of suffering. Yet through it all, God was preparing him for a greater purpose. By the end of his journey, Joseph was able to say, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." Genesis 50:20. His trials not only shaped his character, but also positioned him to save an entire nation. In your own life, the trials you face may feel overwhelming. You may wonder if they have any purpose or if they are simply random misfortunes. But James 1:2-4 reminds us that God is always at work, even in the hardest moments. He is using your struggles to refine your faith, build your perseverance, and prepare you for His purposes. This doesn't mean the process will be easy. Growth often involves discomfort. But it's in the stretching, in the refining, that we become who God created us to be. As you face trials, remember that you are not walking through them alone. God is with you, giving you the strength to endure and the grace to persevere. Take a moment to reflect. What trials are you facing right now? How might God be using these challenges to strengthen your faith and build perseverance in your life? These questions are not meant to minimize your pain, but to remind you that your pain is not without purpose. The joy James speaks of is not a superficial happiness that ignores reality. It's a deep, abiding joy that comes from knowing that God is in control, that He is working all things together for good, and that He is shaping you into His image. This joy doesn't eliminate the storm, but it gives you the strength to endure it with hope. As we continue, we will explore how this perseverance leads to deeper intimacy with God, and how trials can transform not just your faith, but the lives of those around you. Stay with me, because the next part will reveal how God's timing, even in the trials, is always perfect. You won't want to miss this next chapter of hope and restoration. Number 8. The book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, verse 1. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. Wartana, timing is everything. Yet one of the greatest challenges we face as humans is trusting God's timing, especially when life seems to be unraveling. In this profound verse from Ecclesiastes, we're reminded that everything in life unfolds in seasons, both the joyous moments and the difficult ones. Life's storms often feel unbearable because they disrupt our plans. We want things to happen when it's convenient for us, in the way we expect. But this verse teaches us that life is governed by God's divine timing, not ours. He orchestrates every season with a purpose, even when we don't understand it. Take a moment to reflect on the natural seasons: spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Each season has its purpose and beauty. Spring brings renewal, summer brings growth, autumn brings harvest, and winter brings rest. In the same way, the seasons of your life are intentional. Some seasons are filled with abundance and clarity, while others are marked by struggle and uncertainty. Yet, all of them are necessary for the journey God is leading you on. A time for everything means that even your pain has a purpose. It may be hard to see when you're in the midst of it, but God is using this season to shape you, teach you, and prepare you for what's ahead. What feels like a delay or a detour is often part of His plan to position you for something greater. Consider the story of Abraham and Sarah. God promised them a child, but they waited decades before Isaac was born. During that time, they struggled with doubt and impatience. They even tried to take matters into their own hands, which led to more challenges. But when Isaac was finally born, they saw the fulfillment of God's promise in His perfect timing. Why does God make us wait? Why doesn't He answer our prayers immediately or deliver us from our storms the moment we cry out to Him? It's because waiting is part of His process. Waiting teaches us to trust Him, to lean on His strength, and to surrender our need for control. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 40, verse 31, we are reminded, but those who wait on the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Waiting isn't passive. It's an active trust in God's promises. It's a time of preparation where He equips us for what's ahead. Let's consider the winter season as an example. During winter, the trees look barren and it seems like nothing is happening. But beneath the surface, the roots are growing deeper, preparing the tree to flourish in spring. In the same way, your winter season might feel barren, but God is deepening your faith and preparing you for a season of growth and fruitfulness. Another example of God's timing can be seen in the story of Lazarus. In the Gospel of John, chapter 11, Lazarus falls ill, and his sisters, Mary and Martha, send word to Jesus. But instead of coming immediately, Jesus waits 2 days before going to them. By the time he arrives, Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. From a human perspective, it seems like Jesus was too late. But in God's plan, His timing was perfect. Jesus didn't just heal Lazarus. He performed a greater miracle by raising him from the dead, revealing His power over life and death. This story reminds us that God's delays are not denial. What feels like a dead end may actually be the setup for a greater testimony. What season are you in right now? Are you waiting for answers, healing, or breakthrough? Maybe you feel like you've been in the winter season for far too long, wondering if spring will ever come. This verse from Ecclesiastes assures you that your season will change. Trusting God's timing requires surrender. It means letting go of your timeline and trusting that His plan is better. It means believing that He is at work, even when you can't see it. And it means holding on to the promise that He makes everything beautiful in its time, as Ecclesiastes 3:11 reminds us. God's timing is not just about when things happen, it's about how they happen. He aligns circumstances, people, and events in ways that bring Him glory and work for your good. It's in the waiting that we learn to rely on Him completely, to find peace in His presence, and to grow in faith. As you reflect on this truth, remember that no season lasts forever. If you're in a storm right now, hold on to the promise that a new season is coming. The same God who governs the seasons of the earth is governing the seasons of your life. He is faithful, and He will bring you through this season in His perfect timing. Number 9. The Book of Lamentations, chapter 3, verses 22-23. Because of the Lord's great love we are not consumed, for His compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. When we think of life's most difficult storms, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. The weight of challenges, disappointments, and unanswered questions can leave us wondering how much more we can endure. Yet these powerful words from the Book of Lamentations remind us of an unshakable truth. God's mercy and compassion are unending, and His faithfulness renews us daily. This verse was written by the prophet Jeremiah during one of Israel's darkest times. The city of Jerusalem had been destroyed, and the people were in despair. Yet in the midst of devastation, Jeremiah declares the enduring love and faithfulness of God. He shifts the focus from the destruction around him to the steadfast nature of God's character. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. These words remind us that it is God's love that sustains us, even when life feels unbearable. His love is not conditional or fleeting. It is the very foundation of our hope. No matter how fierce the storm, His love holds us together. Consider the phrase, His compassions never fail. The word compassions speaks to God's deep, tender care for His children. It's the kind of love that notices every tear, understands every pain, and moves to provide comfort and strength. Unlike human compassion, which can grow weary or waver, God's compassion is infinite. This is reinforced by the next line. They are new every morning. Think about that. Every single day, God renews His mercy toward you. No matter what happened yesterday, no matter how heavy your burdens feel, each morning brings a fresh outpouring of His grace. Why is this so significant? Because storms often leave us feeling depleted, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. We wake up weary, wondering how we'll face another day. But here, God promises that we don't have to rely on our own strength. Every morning, He meets us with exactly what we need to keep going. His mercies are new, His strength is abundant, and His love is constant. Great is your faithfulness. Faithfulness is one of the defining attributes of God. It means that He is unchanging, dependable, and true to His promises. When He says He will never leave you or forsake you, He means it. When He promises to carry you through the storm, He will. His faithfulness is not dependent on our circumstances. It is rooted in who He is. Let's pause to reflect on what this means for your life. Are you facing a storm that feels like it will consume you? Are you struggling to find hope in the middle of pain? This passage reminds you that no matter how overwhelming your situation feels, God's love and mercy are greater. You are not consumed because His compassion sustains you. One of the most beautiful aspects of God's faithfulness is that it doesn't just sustain us, it transforms us. In the storm, we are refined. In the struggle, we are strengthened. And in the waiting, we learn to trust Him more deeply. His mercies are not just a lifeline, they are an invitation to experience His presence in a profound way. Think about the times in your life when you felt at your weakest. How did God sustain you during those moments? Maybe it was through a timely word of encouragement, an unexpected provision, or a peace that surpassed understanding. These moments are reminders that His faithfulness is active and personal. In the storms of life, it's easy to feel forgotten or unseen, but this verse assures us that God's compassion never fails. He sees every tear, hears every prayer, and knows every fear. His faithfulness is not distant or abstract. It's deeply personal. He is with you in the storm, providing exactly what you need moment by moment. Another powerful aspect of this passage is the idea of renewal. Life's challenges have a way of wearing us down, but God promises to renew us every morning. This isn't just physical renewal, it's a renewal of hope, faith, and purpose. It's a reminder that no matter how dark the night feels, the dawn is coming. Jeremiah's words in Lamentations are a testament to the power of focusing on God's character rather than our circumstances. When we anchor ourselves in His love and faithfulness, we find strength to endure the storms and hope for what lies ahead. As you meditate on this truth, let it remind you that you are not walking through your storm alone. God's love surrounds you, His mercy sustains you, and His faithfulness carries you. Each new day is an opportunity to lean into His grace and experience His presence in a deeper way. In the next part, we'll explore how God uses His faithfulness to not only sustain us, but to guide us toward His greater purpose. Together, we'll uncover how His plans for us are good, even when the path is unclear. Don't miss it. Number 10, the book of Jeremiah, chapter 29, verse 11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where nothing seems to make sense, where the storm is so fierce that you can't see past the waves? In those moments, it's easy to feel lost and question whether God has forgotten you. But in this powerful verse from Jeremiah, God gives us a promise that changes everything. He has a plan for your life, a plan filled with hope, purpose, and a future. Let's step back for a moment and reflect on the context of this verse. The people of Israel were in exile, far from their homeland and feeling abandoned. They had lost everything familiar and were struggling to understand why God allowed this to happen. And it was in this dark and uncertain time that God spoke these words through the prophet Jeremiah. For I know the plans I have for you. Notice that God doesn't say, I might have a plan, or I'll figure something out. He says, I know the plans. This is a declaration of His sovereignty and intentionality. Even when life feels chaotic, God's plans remain steady and purposeful. But here's the part that often challenges us. God's plans don't always align with our expectations. The Israelites wanted immediate deliverance from exile, but God's plan involved a longer journey of transformation and restoration. He wasn't just focused on their circumstances, He was focused on their hearts. This is the same for us today. When we face storms, we often want God to fix things instantly, but His plans go deeper than our immediate comfort. He is shaping us, growing our faith, and preparing us for something greater. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. The word prosper here doesn't necessarily mean financial success or an easy life. It speaks to a deeper sense of well-being, wholeness, and spiritual flourishing. God's plans are always for your ultimate good, even if they don't look the way you expect. Plans to give you hope and a future. Hope is a powerful thing. It's the anchor that keeps us steady in the storm. When God promises hope, He's not offering wishful thinking. He's offering the certainty of His presence and His promises. No matter how uncertain your future feels, God's plan is filled with hope. As you think about this promise, consider the storms in your own life. Maybe you face setbacks that left you questioning God's plan. Maybe you're in a season of waiting, wondering if God is still working. Jeremiah 29:11 reminds us that God's plan is never off course. Even when we can't see it, He is weaving every piece of our story into something beautiful. Now let's take a moment to reflect on the power of sharing this hope. Think about how many people in the world are struggling to find meaning in their storms. How many are feeling hopeless, just like the Israelites in exile? Here's where you can make a difference. By following this channel, you're helping to spread the message of Jesus to people who desperately need hope. Each subscription, each like, each share is a way of amplifying God's truth to reach hearts that are searching for answers. It might seem like a small action, but it carries a big impact. Imagine someone stumbling across this video during a dark moment, hearing about God's plans for their life and finding the hope they've been longing for. That's the kind of transformation your simple act of following can help create. If you haven't already, I invite you to hit that subscribe button. By doing so, you're not just joining a community, you're becoming part of a mission to bring light to a world in need. Together, we can ensure that the message of God's love and faithfulness reaches as many people as possible. And here's something else you can do. Leave a comment below as a declaration of faith. Write this powerful phrase, "God's plans for me are good, and I trust Him completely." When you share these words, you're not only affirming your faith, you're encouraging others who may be struggling to trust God's plan. Your words could be the spark of hope that someone needs to keep going. As we move forward, remember this: God's plans are always greater than our understanding. He sees the whole picture, and His timing is perfect. Even when the storm feels endless, His promise remains true. He has a plan to give you hope and a future. Number 11, the book of Proverbs, chapter 3, verses 5 to 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. Trust is one of the most challenging aspects of faith, especially when the storms of life seem relentless. Yet, this timeless verse from Proverbs calls us to a deeper level of surrender, a trust that involves our whole heart, not just parts of it. It's an invitation to release our grip on our plans, our fears, and our need to control, and to place our confidence fully in the Lord. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. What does it mean to trust God with all your heart? It means believing in His goodness, even when circumstances suggest otherwise. It means holding on to His promises, even when you don't yet see them fulfilled. Trusting with your whole heart leaves no room for doubt or hesitation. It's an act of total dependence on God, acknowledging that He is faithful and sovereign. But here's where it gets difficult. Lean not on your own understanding. As humans, we crave answers. We want to make sense of our situations, to connect the dots, and to see the path ahead clearly. But God's ways are higher than ours, and His plans often defy human logic. When we lean on our own understanding, we limit ourselves to what we can see and comprehend. Trusting God requires us to let go of our need for explanations and to embrace the mystery of His will. The second part of this verse, "In all your ways submit to Him," speaks to the posture of surrender. To submit means to yield to God's authority, to acknowledge that His plans are better than ours. This doesn't mean passively sitting back and doing nothing. It means actively seeking His will in every aspect of our lives and aligning our choices with His guidance. And He will make your path straight. This is the promise that follows our trust and submission. When we let go of our own understanding and allow God to lead, He clears the way for us. A straight path doesn't mean a life free of challenges. It means a life aligned with his purpose, where he removes obstacles that would hinder us from fulfilling his plans. Think about the Israelites during their journey to the Promised Land. Time and time again, they struggled to trust God, leaning instead on their own fears and doubts. Yet, when they obeyed him and followed his direction, he made a way where there seemed to be no way. He parted the Red Sea, provided manna in the wilderness, and brought them to the land he had promised. In your own life, what areas are you finding difficult to surrender? Maybe it's a decision about your future, a relationship, or a storm you're currently facing. Proverbs 3:5-6 reminds us that when we place our trust in God, he takes the burden of figuring everything out off our shoulders. Our job is to trust. His job is to lead. But trust doesn't mean we won't experience fear or uncertainty. It means choosing faith in the face of those feelings. It means reminding ourselves that God is not only capable, but also willing to guide us. He knows the end from the beginning, and his plans are always for our good. Trust also grows in relationship. The more time we spend with God, through prayer, worship, and meditating on his word, the more we learn to recognize his voice and understand his heart. Just as trust between two people deepens over time, so does our trust in God when we invest in our relationship with him. One of the most beautiful aspects of this verse is the assurance that God is actively involved in our lives. He doesn't leave us to navigate the storms on our own. He is constantly working behind the scenes, orchestrating events and aligning circumstances for his glory and our good. Think about the moments in your life where hindsight revealed God's hand. Maybe there was a time when you felt lost, but looking back, you can see how he guided you, even when you didn't realize it. These moments remind us that trusting God is not a blind leap. It's a confident step based on his proven faithfulness. As you reflect on this passage, consider what it would look like to trust God fully with your current situation. Are you holding on to fear, doubt, or the need to control? What might happen if you released those burdens and chose to lean on him instead of your own understanding? Proverbs 3:5-6 invites us into a partnership with God. He asks for our trust and submission, and in return, he promises to guide us on the path he has prepared. This path may not always be easy, but it will always lead to his purpose and his peace. In the next part, we'll explore how God's guidance brings peace, even in the midst of chaos, and how his presence transforms every step of the journey. You won't want to miss it. Number 12, the book of Philippians, chapter 4, verse 7. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. What does it mean to experience peace in the middle of a storm? How can you feel calm when everything around you is uncertain, painful, or overwhelming? This verse from Philippians offers an answer that defies human logic. The peace of God is not like the peace the world gives. It's deeper, stronger, and unshakable. It's a peace that can only come from him, and it guards both your heart and mind when life feels like it's spinning out of control. The Apostle Paul wrote these words while he was imprisoned. His circumstances were far from peaceful. He faced threats, hardship, and uncertainty about his future. Yet, even in that situation, Paul experienced a peace so profound that he could confidently write about it to encourage others. This tells us something important. The peace of God is not dependent on our circumstances. It is a gift that comes from his presence and power. The peace of God, which transcends all understanding. This phrase is key. God's peace is beyond our ability to fully comprehend. It doesn't always make sense, especially when you're facing trials that seem insurmountable. From a human perspective, peace often seems tied to the absence of conflict or difficulty. But God's peace is different. It exists in the midst of the storm, not just after it passes. Consider the story of Jesus calming the storm in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 4, verses 35-41. The disciples were terrified as the wind and waves threatened to sink their boat. But Jesus, in complete calm, rebuked the storm with 3 simple words: "Peace, be still." Instantly, the sea was calm. While the disciples were focused on the chaos around them, Jesus demonstrated that true peace comes from knowing who is in control. This is the same peace that Paul describes in Philippians 4:7. It's the peace that comes when you recognize that God is in control of your life, even when the storm rages on. It's the peace that allows you to say, I don't understand why this is happening, but I trust that God is with me and that his plans are good. The next part of the verse tells us that this peace will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. The word guard paints the picture of a soldier standing watch, protecting something valuable. God's peace acts as a shield, guarding your heart, your emotions, and your mind, your thoughts, from being overwhelmed by fear, doubt, and despair. Think about how powerful this is. When life is chaotic, it's easy for your thoughts to spiral into anxiety and your heart to be weighed down by fear. But God's peace intercepts those attacks. It keeps you anchored, reminding you of his promises and his presence. So how do we access this peace? In the verse just before this one, Philippians 4:6, Paul gives us a clue. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Peace begins with prayer. When you bring your worries to God, you're not just unloading your burdens, you're transferring them to the one who is able to carry them. But notice the key element Paul includes: thanksgiving. Gratitude shifts your perspective. When you thank God, even in the middle of difficulty, you're choosing to focus on his goodness rather than your problems. You're reminding yourself of his faithfulness in the past, which strengthens your trust in him for the future. Reflect for a moment. Where in your life do you need God's peace? Is it in a situation that feels out of your control? Is it in a relationship, a decision, or a fear about the future? Whatever it is, this verse reminds you that peace is not something you have to manufacture on your own. It is a gift from God, available to you when you place your trust in him. One of the most profound aspects of God's peace is that it transforms not only your outlook, but also your impact on others. When you walk in peace, even in difficult circumstances, people notice. Your life becomes a testimony of God's power, showing others that his peace is real and available to them too. Let's look at another example. The early Christians in the book of Acts. Despite persecution, imprisonment, and suffering, they displayed an unshakable peace and joy that confounded their oppressors. Their peace wasn't rooted in their circumstances, it was rooted in their relationship with Jesus. The same is true for you. The peace of God is not a fleeting feeling or a temporary solution. It is a constant presence that guards your heart and mind, reminding you that you are held by the one who created the universe. As you reflect on Philippians 4:7, ask yourself, what would it look like to live with this kind of peace? How would it change the way you face your current challenges? How might it impact the people around you? This peace is available to you today. It doesn't require perfect faith or a life free of struggles. It simply requires a willingness to trust God and invite him into your situation. And when you do, his peace will guard you, sustain you, and carry you through every storm. Number 13, the book of Psalms, chapter 23, verse 4. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Few passages in Scripture resonate as deeply as Psalm 23. This verse in particular speaks to the moments when life feels its heaviest, when the valleys seem so dark that you can barely see the path ahead. Yet even in the shadow of uncertainty, fear, and despair, David declares a profound truth. God is present, and his presence changes everything. Even though I walk through the darkest valley. Notice that David acknowledges the reality of the valley. He doesn't pretend it doesn't exist or dismiss its weight. The darkest valley is a metaphor for life's most painful and challenging moments. Grief, loss, illness, betrayal, or overwhelming uncertainty. These valleys are unavoidable, but the key is in the next part of the verse, I will fear no evil. How is it possible not to fear when the valley is so dark? David's confidence comes not from his circumstances, but from the one who walks with him. For you are with me. This is the foundation of his peace. The presence of God doesn't necessarily remove the valley, but it transforms the experience of walking through it. Think of a child holding their parent's hand in a frightening situation. The fear doesn't vanish completely, but the child feels safe because they know they are not alone. In the same way, God's presence offers us security even when the shadows feel overwhelming. David continues, "Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." The rod and staff are tools of a shepherd, symbols of guidance and protection. The rod was used to defend the sheep from predators, while the staff was used to guide them back to the right path when they wandered. In this verse, these tools represent God's active care for his people. The imagery of God as a shepherd is deeply personal. A shepherd knows each sheep intimately, leads them to places of nourishment, and protects them from harm. In the same way, God knows you by name. He knows your fears, your struggles, and your pain. And just like a shepherd, he walks with you through the valley, guiding and guarding you every step of the way. The promise in this verse is not that you'll avoid the valley, but that you'll never face it alone. God's presence is the constant that steadies you, even when everything else feels unstable. His rod and staff remind you that he is in control, defending you from unseen dangers and guiding you toward his purpose. Let's pause and consider the valleys in your life. Are you in a season where the shadows feel heavy and hope seems distant? Maybe it's a storm you didn't expect, one that has shaken your confidence and left you wondering if you'll ever find your way out. This verse offers a powerful reminder: the valley is not the end of the story. In fact, the very act of walking through the valley is significant. The word "through" implies that the valley is temporary. You are not meant to stay there forever. God is leading you through it, and on the other side is the green pasture and still water that he promises earlier in Psalm 23. But why does God allow us to walk through valleys in the first place? The answer lies in the process of transformation. It's often in the darkest moments that our faith is refined. In the valley, we learn to rely on God in ways we never would in the comfort of the mountaintop. The shadows teach us to trust the shepherd's voice, to recognize his guidance, and to experience his comfort on a deeper level. Consider the story of Job. He walked through one of the darkest valleys imaginable, losing his family, his wealth, and his health. Yet even in his pain he declared, "Though he slay me, yet I will hope in him." Job 13:15. Job's valley was not the end of his story. Through his suffering, God revealed his faithfulness, restoring Job and deepening his understanding of God's character. The same is true for you. Your valley is not the final chapter. God is working in ways you can't yet see, using even the darkest moments to shape you and draw you closer to him. As you meditate on this verse, remember that fear doesn't have the final say. The presence of God is greater than the shadows. His rod defends you, his staff guides you, and his love sustains you. The next time you find yourself in a valley, hold on to this truth. You are never alone. The God who created the heavens and the earth is walking beside you, and his presence is enough to calm your fears and lead you forward. In the next part, we'll uncover how God uses the valleys to prepare us for the mountaintops, and how his plans for restoration go far beyond what we could ever imagine. Stay with me. You won't want to miss it. Number 14, the book of Romans, chapter 8, verse 18. I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. Suffering is an inevitable part of the human experience. Whether it comes in the form of personal loss, hardship, or an enduring trial, it can often feel overwhelming and endless. Yet, in this verse, Paul shifts our perspective in a way that transforms how we view suffering. He reminds us that our current pain, as real and heavy as it may feel, is temporary when placed in the context of eternity. Paul's words, written to the church in Rome, carry profound weight because of his own experiences. He was no stranger to suffering. From shipwrecks to beatings, imprisonment and rejection, Paul endured more trials than most of us can imagine. Yet, he confidently declares that all these sufferings pale in comparison to the glory that awaits us in God's eternal plan. Our present sufferings are not worth comparing. This phrase invites us to pause and reframe our perspective. Suffering in the moment often consumes us. It demands our focus, fills our thoughts, and can make us feel as though it is all there is. But Paul challenges us to look beyond the present and consider the eternal. The glory that Paul speaks of is not just a distant hope, it's a promise. It's the assurance that God is preparing something so extraordinary for us that it will far outweigh any pain we endure now. This glory is not only about the eternal joy we will experience in heaven, but also the transformative work God is doing in us here and now. To understand this better, let's reflect on the metaphor of refining gold. The refining process involves intense heat to remove impurities, leaving behind something pure and valuable. In the same way, our present sufferings act as a refining fire. God uses the trials we face to purify our hearts, strengthen our character, and draw us closer to Him. Paul elaborates on this idea earlier in the same chapter, in Romans 8:28, where he writes, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." But this doesn't mean that everything we experience is good, but it does mean that God, in His sovereignty, can use even the hardest moments for a greater purpose. It's also important to note that Paul isn't dismissing suffering or suggesting that it's easy to endure. He's not saying, just ignore it and think about heaven. Instead, he acknowledges the weight of suffering while offering a perspective that anchors us in hope. Consider for a moment the story of Jesus. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he prayed in agony, knowing the suffering he was about to face on the cross. Yet in Hebrews 12:2, we're reminded that he endured the cross for the joy set before him. Jesus looked beyond the immediate pain to the eternal purpose, the salvation of humanity, and the restoration of our relationship with God. This same eternal perspective is available to us. The pain we experience now is not meaningless. It is shaping us, refining us, and preparing us for the glory that will one day be revealed. Think about the challenges you're facing right now. Maybe it's a health issue, a broken relationship, or a season of uncertainty. What would it look like to view these struggles through the lens of Romans 8:18? How might your perspective change if you believe that the glory ahead is so great that it makes today's pain seem small in comparison? Paul's message also reminds us that suffering is not the final chapter. There is a day coming when God will wipe every tear from our eyes, as promised in the book of Revelation, chapter 21, verse 4. On that day, there will be no more death, mourning, crying, or pain. Everything broken will be restored, and the glory of God will shine so brightly that all earthly suffering will fade into insignificance. But even before that day arrives, God is present in your suffering. He is not a distant observer. He is a loving Father who walks with you through every trial. His grace sustains you, His strength empowers you, and His promises give you hope. As you meditate on this verse, allow it to shift your focus from what is temporary to what is eternal. Ask yourself, how is God using my present sufferings to shape me? What might He be preparing me for? And how can I trust Him more deeply in this process? The glory that will be revealed in us is not just something we wait for, it's something that begins to take root in our hearts even now. Through the work of the Holy Spirit, we are being transformed day by day, becoming more like Christ and reflecting His light to the world. No matter how heavy the storm feels, Romans 8:18 reminds us that there is a greater hope, a greater joy, and a greater purpose that awaits. Hold on to this promise, knowing that the trials of today are nothing compared to the glory of tomorrow. In the next part, we'll explore how God's ultimate plan for restoration not only brings hope, but also reveals His unchanging love for us, even in the midst of life's most difficult storms. Stay with me as we continue this journey. Number 15, the book of Revelation, chapter 21, verses 4-5. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. He who was seated on the throne said, "I am making everything new." Then He said, "Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true." There is perhaps no greater promise in Scripture than the one found in these verses from Revelation. They describe a future so breathtakingly beautiful that it defies human comprehension, a time when every sorrow will be erased, every wound healed, and every injustice made right. This is the ultimate hope for all who trust in God, the assurance that He is preparing a world where pain, death, and tears will be no more. Let's start with the imagery. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. This is such an intimate picture of God's care. It's not just a general statement about the end of suffering, it's deeply personal. Imagine the creator of the universe, with all His power and majesty, gently wiping away your tears. This act signifies His compassion, His closeness, and His desire to comfort you personally. The verse continues, "There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." What a profound promise. Everything that causes heartache in this life, disease, loss, betrayal, fear, will one day cease to exist. The old order, which we've come to know so painfully well, will give way to something entirely new. But here's the critical part. This promise is not just wishful thinking. It comes directly from He who was seated on the throne. This is the voice of God Himself, the one who reigns over all creation, declaring with authority, "I am making everything new." These words carry the weight of divine certainty. When God speaks, it is done. Now think about what this means for the storms you face in life. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by pain and uncertainty, to wonder if things will ever get better. But Revelation 21 reminds us that the struggles of this world are temporary. They are part of the old order, which is passing away. God is working towards something far greater, a complete renewal of all things. The phrase, "I am making everything new," speaks not just to the future, but also to the present. Even now, God is in the process of restoring and redeeming. Every trial, every loss, every tear is being woven into His greater plan. While we may not see the full picture yet, we can trust that He is already at work, bringing beauty out of ashes. Consider the words. These words are trustworthy and true. God is inviting us to anchor our hope in His promises. Unlike the fleeting assurances of this world, His word is unchanging and reliable. When He says He will make everything new, we can rest in the certainty that He will fulfill this promise. Let's take a moment to reflect on how this future hope impacts our present reality. When we know that God is preparing a place where pain will be no more, it gives us the strength to endure the storms of today. It doesn't erase the challenges we face, but it gives them context. Our suffering is not meaningless. It is part of a larger story that God is writing, a story that ends in perfect restoration. Think about the brokenness in your own life. Maybe it's a relationship that feels beyond repair, a dream that seems out of reach, or a loss that has left you feeling hollow. Revelation 21 reminds us that none of this is the end. God is not finished. He is making all things new, including you. One of the most powerful aspects of this promise is the invitation it offers. God's renewal isn't limited to a select few. It's available to all who trust in Him. The new heaven and new earth described in Revelation are not just places. They are a fulfillment of God's desire to dwell with His people forever. This means that the hope of Revelation 21 isn't just about the future, it's about relationship. God's ultimate goal is to be with His people, to restore the intimacy that was broken in the Garden of Eden. Every tear He wipes away is a reminder of His love. Every sorrow He erases a testament to His faithfulness. As we close this journey through life's storms, hold on to the truth that God's promises are trustworthy and true. The challenges you face now are real, but they are not the end of your story. There is a day coming when every tear will be wiped away and every pain will be replaced with joy. So as you navigate the valleys, the storms, and the uncertainties of life, remember this: the one who sits on the throne is making everything new. His plan for you is good, His love for you is unending, and His promise to you is eternal. Thank you for walking this journey with me. As we've explored God's promises, His faithfulness, and His presence in the storms of life, I hope you felt the power of His word stirring something new in your heart. This journey isn't just about understanding, it's about transformation. It's about stepping into the life God has called you to live, a life marked by hope, faith, and purpose. But here's the truth. You don't have to walk this journey alone. Jesus teaches us the importance of community. In Matthew 18:20, he promises, "For where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there am I with them." There is power in coming together, in growing alongside others who share the same desire to follow Jesus and live according to his teachings. This is why I want to invite you to take the next step and become a member of this community. By clicking the join button, you're not just signing up for something, you're becoming part of something bigger. You're stepping into a space of shared purpose, mutual support, and collective growth. Here, you'll find a family of believers who are committed to encouraging one another, learning from one another, and walking the path of faith together. As a member, you'll gain access to deeper reflections, exclusive content, and insights designed to help you grow spiritually. These are resources created to challenge, inspire, and equip you for the storms and joys of life. Imagine having a place where you can dive deeper into God's Word, ask the hard questions, and find answers rooted in truth. A place where every reflection, every message, every discussion points you back to the peace and purpose that can only be found in Jesus. This isn't just about receiving, it's about participating. It's about creating a space where we can pray for each other, share our stories, and celebrate the victories God is working in our lives. It's about being part of a family where your voice matters and your journey is valued. Together, we can discover the true depth of God's love and the peace He offers to those who seek Him. I want you to think about what it means to belong to something like this, to know that no matter what you're facing, there's a community standing with you, cheering you on and reminding you of God's promises. This is more than membership. It's an opportunity to strengthen your faith, deepen your understanding, and find encouragement in the fellowship of other believers. And here's something even more profound. By becoming a member, you're also helping to spread this message of hope to others. Every step you take in this community, every time you engage with these teachings, you're helping us reach more people who need to hear about Jesus. You're playing a part in something eternal, changing lives, inspiring faith, and pointing hearts back to God. For those of you who have stayed with me until the very end of this message, thank you. Your commitment to hearing God's word and seeking His truth is a testament to your faith and your desire to grow in Him. This is no small thing. Jesus said in John 15:5, "If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit." You're taking steps toward that fruit, toward a life that reflects His love and grace. If you've made it this far, I'd love for you to leave a comment below with these words: "I stayed until the end because I'm committed to my transformation in Christ." Your declaration of faith not only strengthens your own journey, but encourages others who are walking this same path. As we close, I want to encourage you to keep going. At the end of this video, you'll see 2 suggested messages appear on the screen. Each one is carefully chosen to help you deepen your connection with Jesus and find even more inspiration for your spiritual walk. Take a moment to explore these teachings. Let them guide you further along the road of faith, where God is waiting to reveal even more of His goodness. Finally, if you haven't already, I want to invite you to follow this channel. By doing so, you're joining us in spreading the message of Jesus to more hearts, more homes, and more lives. Each subscription helps us expand this ministry, bringing the light of Christ into the darkest places. Together, we can carry His hope to a world in desperate need of it. Thank you again for being part of this journey. You are not here by accident. God has brought you to this moment for a reason. My prayer is that you leave today encouraged, strengthened, and filled with a renewed sense of His presence. No matter where you are in your walk, know this: God is with you and He is for you. May His peace guard your heart, and may His love guide your steps as you continue seeking Him with all your heart.